On today's episode, we talk about feats.
Everything okay, Charles?
You don't smell that?
No.
Are you sure you don't smell that?
No.
Because it smells like
Don't you dare.
smelly feats. Hey.
Welcome to What is Tabletop. I'm Frank Joseph Hall, AGM of 10 years, and with me is Charles. I'm Pun Master of 10 years. Probably longer, honestly.
Definitely longer.
And let it be known, this was not the worst version of this bit.
There were worse versions.
Yeah, I would have been sincere about it. Much worse version. Much worse. But we're here to talk about feats because we're using feats in our RPG. Isn't that right, Charles?
You and I discussed this, and we felt going the way of feats versus like class abilities and things like that wasn't really in tune with what we were working with.
Yeah, basically when we say we discussed this, I asked Charles a question, and Charles was like, huh. And then he thought about it, and he was like, I think I want to do this. That's how we ended up here.
I mean, that's a discussion, right?
Yeah, sure. Anyway, we're going to be talking about feats and all the different ways you can use them in your RPGs. But first, like, comment, subscribe. Tell us that you love us, or tell us how bad Charles's puns are.
And also join our Discord where he talks about lots of stuff. Let me do that again.
No. What other stuffs do we talk about?
We talks about feats in our Discord sometimes.
Actually, have we talked about? Well, we'll probably talk about feats after this video comes out for sure.
For sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but join our Discord. Tell us what we're wrong about things. Tell us we're right about things. Tell us you're indifferent about our things.
Yeah, that's the point of the Discord. Tell us we're wrong. Even though I think most people are just nice to us.
I think so, too.
Yeah, I don't know if you would want to join a Discord just to be like, I hate you guys. It's a lot of energy to do that.
I'm sure people do that, though.
Yeah, not in ours.
Not in ours.
At least, not yet.
We're not that famous yet.
All right, so we're talking about feats, but we're going to be talking about them in the ways that, not how to make a feat, because each game is different. So instead, we're going to be talking about like the broad understanding of how feats work, how some games use them in different ways, and just the ways that you can make sure your players don't just overload the game by having broken combinations of feats.
Frank, what do you feel the appeal of feats would be?
I would say the reason you would want feats in a game is because usually it's a classless system, though there are some class systems that use feats, and we'll get into that. The idea is mostly that you want to be able to have players differentiate the characters from each other, but you don't want like such a rigid structure like classes where they're forced down a specific path. You want them to be able to kind of do whatever they want. You might have ideas of certain feats that combo with each other, but inevitably what will happen is you will have players who will take feats you never thought could work together, scrunch them together, and then they're going to be doing really cool stuff.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. So we know there's lots of systems out there that use feats. So I guess we should always talk about the obvious one.
The elephant in the room.
That's a terrible elephant sound.
It is a terrible elephant sound, and we're talking about 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, just because it's the thing that everyone knows, even if you don't like it, which we're indifferent to it.
Yeah.
It's got its place, but it uses feats. They used to be optional until the 2024 rules came out, and now they are semi-mandatory.
Yeah, because you have to have you get one at character creation through Origins, right?
Through backgrounds, and then also whenever you would take an ASI is when you could have taken a feat.
Correct.
But now one of the feats is just the ASI, so that's why I say they're not necessarily mandatory because you can still do an ASI instead.
Oh, so one of the options, I didn't realize that when I was looking at the 2024 handbook, that the ASI was included in the feats.
Yes, it is a feat, basically. So they changed it, but not really. They just basically went from saying it was an optional rule to basically not having it be an optional rule anymore. But the important thing to talk about is it is a class-based game, and it uses feats. Why would you use feats in a class-based game, Charles?
That's a great question. I assume to kind of diversify, like kind of mix things up a little bit in your game, possibly?
Yes, that's basically the idea, is that you might have subclasses and other things in 5th edition, but you don't want them to be too similar, right? You can, if we both play a fighter, we want there to be some flexibility between how you fight and how I fight, right? And there's a few different ways you can do that in 5th edition, but the idea of feats is it can separate your characters out even more, ideally. I think in practice, that's not what happens.
The way feats were intended to be used in D&D 2024, or in general, was that you have your class. You could be warlock, but you could also have the feats basically are for anyone. Anyone can have these feats.
I mean, there's some prerequisites and stuff like that, but the idea is anyone can take them. The problem is because anyone can take them, and you get optimizers,
right,
who are like, well, here's the best feats to take, right? Because you can get fun feats like the chef feat, where you get to make little morsel things. But when you get to do that and someone else gets a feat that allows them to stop someone dead in their tracks from escaping in a combat-focused game, one of those is a little bit more important than the other.
That's the Sentinel feat, right?
Yeah, the Sentinel feat.
I love that feat.
Yeah, and then if you tie it with Polar Master, which I don't know if that's intended or not, it's super broken because now it's just anytime someone enters your range, you can attack them and then they stop. So you can always keep people at bay. And so basically what you're doing is you're never actually fighting someone melee to melee.
It's basically a fancy hold person.
Yeah, it's a less restrictive hold person.
Yeah,
because they don't make a failure. It's up on you.
Yeah. Wow, that is broken.
Yeah, and so that's kind of the problem that I found with 5th edition's versions of feats is that ultimately you just want to take the same few. And there's a lot of times where it's like, oh, cool, I get a new feat, and you flip through and you're like, I don't really want any of these. I guess I could take this kind of feat that makes me like part shadow person, but it's not as good, and I only get to use it like once per day. Versus other classes. So like for example, the fighter gets more feats than anyone else, and the idea is you get to supplement what would be fighter abilities with other stuff. But when you compare it to like the paladin getting some cool stuff, or like the barbarian or the rogue getting like better versions of what they have, and you're a fighter and you're like, I guess I can take this thing that's not that good.
Right.
It's not as fun, you know? It kind of feels bad a little bit.
They almost seem unnecessary to some degree. I mean, I can see, again, I understand where they're coming from, but to me, to some degree, they just feel it's just a flourish. It's like, oh, here's something extra to give your character.
And I think that's why they were optional. They were just intended to be additional things, but then people liked the Optimancers liked it. Some of the role players liked it because you could do some weird stuff, but like the role playing feats aren't even as fun as they could be.
I was going to say, when I create a character, because of my role-playing background and what I like to do when I'm playing, I always look for the more narrative feats that go along. Oh, this matches up to my character. So I'm not what you call an optimizer. I can be. I know how to optimize. I just choose to go with the feats that's like, oh, this would seem like something my character would want to have an ability in. But yeah, ultimately, I feel like the feats in Dungeons & Dragons are just kind of there. You know? They're nice. They're just not like, they're not a necessity.
Yeah. I think feats really flourish when you can somehow tie them together, where it's the role play and the mechanics tie together in such an interesting way that you are like, oh, well, yeah, of course I'm going to take this feat because like mechanically it does this, but then I'm forced to role play it a little bit. I think those are where feats really shine. And we'll talk about that in the first section of feats we're going to go to. Are you enjoying the video so far? Then you should check out our Patreon, where we have a bunch of additional stuff that you can enjoy.
We have a series called We're Promised We're Friends, because apparently people think we're not, because Frank is mean to me.
I am not mean to you, but we do talk about all various things, not just tabletop RPGs, a bunch of different stuff. We talk about, is Die Hard a Christmas movie? It's not.
I still concede that it is.
We also have the live streams from all of our design live streams, so if you want to watch them in full, not just the edited clip versions that we put out for free on YouTube, Patreon is also where you want to go.
And of course, there's higher tiers where you can help us design things like one-shots and maybe even play games with us.
And of course, if you're only wanting to watch the videos, you can become a YouTube member and you'll get all the videos that are available on the Patreon as well. We got session zeros, we got upcoming one-shots, all the fun stuff, and you get to be a part of it. Join us on Patreon. Now back to the actual video.
So another way to do this is through categories.
Yes, that is one of the ways to do it, for sure. And obviously we're going to talk about Suede because Savage Worlds predominantly uses feats as its way to build the character.
Right.
And you'll see this in a lot of other games that are inspired by Savage Worlds. For example, Tales from Elsewhere takes a lot from that. And so the way they do this is because they'll have like hundreds of feats. Like anything you can think of will be a feat. And so how can you look for the thing you want if there's so many options?
Right.
Simple. You categorize them. You're going to say, here's the role-playing feats. Here's this kind of a feat, that kind of a feat. Peter kind of goes into a different version, and we'll talk about that in a second. But Suede specifically has feats that you have to take because they're your abilities to do anything. And then they have optional feats. They're more of roleplay heavy feats. And they don't do anything mechanically necessarily. They're just adding like, you're this background or you're this or that, right? And it kind of works. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, as we talked about, I personally like when the roleplay gives you a mechanic that ties into it versus just having them be role-playing feats. Like, you're a blacksmith. Okay, cool. I got blacksmith in my background.
So basically, at the point of character creation, when you're making your character, you have things that are automatically tied to whatever you are, and then these optional ones are basically just to kind of fill out your character a little bit more.
For example, in the Deadlands RPG, they have feats that are like making deals with the devil and like specifically towards magic casters because they have a specific, like, completely different mechanic than everybody else. And so that makes sense to be like, here's the magic feats, right? Here's the hucksters and how they work things out. You want to have that be different because even though you could have a gunslinger who also does magic, you still need to differentiate them because just mechanically they're going to be acting different.
Yeah, I wouldn't imagine a gunslinger and just a straight up magic user would use the same feat in the same way.
Yeah, and so then you'll have some generalized stuff. And by the way, before we continue to get into it, all of these games are going to call feats vastly different things. Edges, perks, you name it. For the sake of simplicity and everything, we're calling them feats for everything.
Yeah.
Because I know, like, even in Savage Worlds, they'll call them edges, but then other certain feats are called this or that. And again, the idea is to differentiate that. I get it. It's just, they're all feats to me.
To me, feats are just abilities, enhanced or extra abilities. Because, as you said, they can be any. Literally, we've played enough. I've played enough games at this point where feats have been called everything from feats to edges to whatever. Yeah.
The only reason I would see to having them have different titles is if then mechanically that's going to be an important thing, right? So it's like for every edge you take, you get +1 to this. That will be important because then if you have different categories of feats, then you're like, well, no, you have 3 edges, but 1 complication. So you don't get a +4, you get a +3 because you only have 3 edges. I think you start to get into the minutia a little too much with that, in my opinion. I understand categorizing them for the sake of being like, this is this is that.
Right.
I think that's good. And that's where like Tales from Elsewhere comes in, where Peter, the way he does it, at least initially, when you're first creating your character, is they're categorized by the type of thing they are. So they're occult feats. There are like brawler, like they're categorized under specific things. And then when you're making your character and you choose this background or this thing, it's saying, cool, you'll choose a feat from one of 3 categories. And that helps just narrow down all the options because he has over like 120 feats. Yeah. And it's insane, which is great, but it can be very overwhelming if you've never played the game before. Right. And then once you start leveling up, once you start progressing, you can get to add more feats to your character. But at that point, the restriction is lifted. You're no longer categorized by things. You get to just choose whatever you want. But at that point, you're kind of already thinking of where you're wanting your character to go.
Absolutely. And lots of times we talked about all these different games having different names for their feats. I feel like it's usually tied to a narrative purpose. It's just a name to call them, but they're ultimately the same thing. But I get why people would want to change the name to just make them more unique.
Yeah,
so to
there's
speak.
Nothing wrong with that. And if you have a really cool name for it, go ahead and use it. I'm just saying, for the sake of simplicity, we're not going to do that.
100%. So this is feet, this is edges, this is whatever else.
But we are going to talk about another way you can kind of use edges. So we talked about categorizing them, and that makes it easier for the players. What's another way we can use feats?
Another one, and this is something I'm kind of interested in for our game, are feat trees.
Yeah, so feat trees, which is predominantly used in the Cosmere RPG most recently. We don't have the physical book because it's not out yet.
But oh my gosh, what a fun game.
Yes, that one is very
What
fun.
a fun game.
Well, but the problem is we got to play at Gen Con, the Mistborn RPG, and Charles we had pre-generated characters. So Charles didn't actually get to see the feats trees.
No, unfortunately didn't.
And obviously, continuing, it's the same group, but they also made the Star Wars, Edge of Empire, all of those games, the Fantasy Flight, Star Wars, and they use feat trees. And the idea of feat trees is, from a visual perspective, it's very noticeable what's going on.
Right.
You get to categorize them and say, here is your bounty hunter feat tree. And then you get to choose, like, okay, I'm going to go down this path, and I have to get this feat before I get this feat, before I get this feat, before I get this feat. And it's just a very obvious visual indicator because usually there's lines and fancy things. Same with the Cosmere RPG. They have it where it's like, cool, you have a bunch of different Knights Radiant paths you can go down. In the Mistborn, it's going to be a bunch of different Mistborn abilities you can have. And you can choose how much you go down one path versus hopping to another path and double dipping there, and then having a good variety of stuff. So the benefit of this is it makes it clear and obvious. Hey, if you're going to go down this path, these are the feats you need to take. Makes it very simple in that regard. It also makes it easy, at least in Cosmere and in Star Wars, that you can go from one to another, and it's not going to detriment you too much. You're going to be able to get multiple abilities from multiple things, and you can clearly see, oh, I see why this is here and this is here. The downside, in my opinion, or at least one of the downsides, is if you have people who do not like to pre-plan, they're not going to be a fan of it.
You don't necessarily need to be a planner necessarily to go use a feat tree, but I think it's important to know like your character. Like you need to know, like you at least have to have an idea of who your character is, and then it's a little easier to navigate. Yeah, if you're just going in there like blindly, then yeah, you're probably gonna have a harder time. But like I said, I don't plan, but I plan enough where it's like, you know, my character's an assassin character, so I'm gonna look for any ability that will enhance that assassin. And I know I choose assassins a lot. I've got a problem.
He does have a problem. Luckily, as long as he doesn't kill me, I think we'll be okay.
I could never. I love that pause.
I will say, I can understand the idea of like, if you want to discover your character as you're playing, right? This is why Daggerheart appeals to a lot of people, is you don't have to think super far in advance. You just have to be like, these are the abilities given to me now. Cool, I want this one.
Yeah.
I will say too, you haven't had this because we haven't really necessarily played too many games like this, but it is a very feels bad moment when you're like, I really want that ability. Oh, I can't get it for another 4 levels.
You're right. And that does suck to think of. Like you've spent all this time, like you're really optimizing your character, and there's some that would just put your character over the edge. You're like, oh, but now I've got to wait.
Yeah, Pathfinder, especially first edition, because it had feat trees, but just not visually indicated that way. It definitely, the joke was, you don't play Pathfinder until level 10. And some people are going to be okay with that. Some people are not. Some people are going to be like, well, what's the point of me waiting to play this really cool thing, right? It's kind of the thing we talked about with the Cosmere RPG, at least with the Stormlight,
right?
Where it's like, okay, so you have to role play to activate the Knight's Radiant Path. That's really cool. But now you're asking players to wait. And especially if you're the kind of the game where you're like, well, we don't want to rush this kind of character development or anything like that. Some people are going to be waiting a while, and you can't really necessarily have these big moments simultaneously happen with like multiple characters, because that's not, you know, that's just going to be clunky. And
I have an opinion on that too. I think if you're going that direction, if you have to have these big role play moments, it's something you pull your players to the side and say, hey, where's your character going? Do you think you're going this direction? You know, I think this would be a really cool way, you know, kind of just guiding a little bit. Not telling them like this is something you could do, and then here's then you can figure out a way to role play it. You kind of give it, so this way you still give them their moment, but without, you know, taking up time to do it. It'd be a lot of pre-planning, but it could solve.
Or you just start at level 3.
Yeah,
and if anyone wants a Knight Radiant Path, they already have it in their backstory.
And you can do that.
Yeah, with the Mistborn, I don't know if you recognize this. We were level 2 characters. We are playing pre-generated characters. They're intentionally giving us as little as possible so we can grasp the game pretty quickly.
Right.
We were level 2 characters, and I was like, wow, that's it?
Yeah,
for level 2?
It did seem very like slim, but again, it's one of those things where I imagine, because I know they're still working. Well, I guess it's finished now at this point.
Yeah, as far as I'm aware, they have the rules pretty much locked and set. It's just more like going to the printers, making sure everything is getting back right. But again, from my perspective, I don't want to start until level 3, because even in the rules, like humans get an additional feat. So you get 2 feats at level 1, an additional one, but like because of the way it works, you can't have one feat stand on its own and be its own cool thing. They build on top of each other. So again, it's a little feels bad when you're starting at level 1 and you have 2 feats and you're like, oh, cool, I can kind of do something. But then later on at like level 4, now you get to actually do the thing you've been wanting to do since level 1.
So if feat trees aren't really your thing, what's another option we can have?
Yeah, we got prerequisites. So it's the same thing, but different.
Yeah. And this is also a thing I'm considering as well.
So the idea about prerequisites is, because here's the idea of feat trees, is you don't want someone to have access to the big, awesome ability too soon.
Right.
And I think that's completely fair. And as we talked about the 9 cents, we talked about it. But there is another way you can have them not have access to the big thing, and that's prerequisites. So, for example, many different ways you can have prerequisites based off of race, heritage, lineage, whatever you want to do, and say, this is only available if you take this specific character option. And by doing that, it's now a choice that the player gets to make of, I really want this really cool feat, but I have to do this thing in order to get that really cool feat. Okay, I'm making the choice to do that. And so it's not as feels bad, Because, sure, they're getting access to a powerful thing, but maybe you're giving them a downside in the thing they have to choose before that, right? In that character option. But they're still getting it at level 1. Conversely, you can have it be something like level-based, right? 5th edition does this, where certain feats you can't take to level 4 because they wanted to make it balanced, right? There's nothing worse than taking Variant Human and being like, I'm taking the most powerful feat in the game at level 1. And then you're the GM and you're like, great, I gotta plan around that now. Yeah. But for some reason they made Lucky still first. That's dumb.
That was an interesting choice.
So this is a way you can do it where you're like, I don't want you to be able to nuke the world at level 5. So we're going to lock that at level 10, whatever your progression might look like.
Balancing a game is difficult enough. And then when you start adding in feats to it, you really have to be careful with what you're doing. So I think Prerequisites is a really good way because it prevents the whole, I've got this amazing character at level 1. Yeah. It's like, oh, no, you don't. You have a good character, but your character will become even better at level like 10 or 15 or whatever.
And that's why I like tying it to how you make the character in character creation.
Yes.
So Fallout does it where you get to put a certain amount of points into each of your special stats, right? And that's going to increase or decrease, but you can only do so much. Certain skills can't get past 7. Charles learned that the hard way.
Yes, I did.
And other skills can't go for like too far low. You have to, you're stuck into like this basically like point buy system that you can't do too much in. And the idea behind that is because every time you level up, you take a feat or a perk, but you take a feat and they are locked based off of your stats. You can't get certain feats until you will have a certain amount of perception in them or a certain amount of luck, or you happen to be, as we talked about, like a super mutant or a human. Like only some of those go to certain ones. You get to then look ahead in some ways and be like, I really want this thing. What do I need? Okay, I need to have this perception in order to craft grenades. I think it's perception. It might be science or intelligence, but the idea is you need to have certain levels in things in order to make it work. And I actually think that's not terrible. And then usually what they do in those scenarios is like, well, oh, you only have a 6, but you need a 7. Okay, there is a perk to increase your special stat by 1. So then next level you can take that.
Which is a nice way to do that, I think, because it gives that player that flexibility still. Like, oh man, I didn't really design my character for this, but I really want this. There are still ways to kind of get it if you're able to. But again, it's going to take you time.
Yeah. For example, when we were playing Fallout, I made a insane luck build that was really fun. And I realized that what I actually enjoyed was like I had a laser rifle and it was doing fine, but I really enjoyed chucking grenades. And so I started looking, I'm like, oh, are there any grenade feats? And there were some really cool ones. And like that wouldn't have been something that I would have immediately planned for. But like, luckily my intelligence was high enough. So I started to look into like, oh, okay, those are some things. Cause another thing we should talk about with feats is feat regret. And the idea of what happens when you take a feat you think you like and it either doesn't play the way you want it to, or you're not playing the way you thought it was going to work out. And now suddenly you're stuck with that feat. If you do not have the means of allowing a player to respec or choose a new feat, it feels bad. And so usually what games will do is be like, every time you level up and take a feat, you may also swap one feat out for another that fits the prereqs, yada, yada. But then obviously, depending on how you do it, right? Feat trees usually don't do this version.
Right.
Because you can't just take like the lowest feat and then apply it for the highest. You always have to have like a straight line.
And that's one of the biggest arguments I have against the feat tree really is because you can't it's really difficult to respec it.
And I understand why, right? Even in Daggerheart, even though it's not feats, they're cards. You can swap out cards whenever you level up, but you can't swap out of a higher level. Like I can't take my first level card and get a 5th level card out of it because that's too strong, right? Then you're always going to be doing that. That's too powerful. But you need to allow people to be able to respec. Now, most GMs, from what I've seen, are willing to be like, oh, hey, you picked a feat that sucks or a line of feats that sucks. Okay, let's think of a narrative way to make it work, or maybe we're going to swap out these feats and that way you get to have a little bit more fun. But that is something to think about, is how are you going to be able to allow your players to respec? And usually non-skill tree feats, the prereq feats, are a little bit easier to do that with. Yeah. I will say, though, there is another version of prereq feats, and we alluded to it, which was how Pathfinder does it.
Right.
And it's basically just skill trees, but not in skill tree form.
So it's a skill tree, but there's the format is not a tree.
Yeah, so I remember in Pathfinder 1, if you wanted, you could eventually shoot 3 arrows simultaneously, kind of like a Robin Hood-esque thing. Yeah, but you had to take first, like, quick shot, and then you had to take dual shot, and then you could take triple shot after you also had another feat, I think, on top of that. You had to take like 4 feats to get to the 3 arrows at once feat.
You know what? To me, even narratively, that kind of tracks. Because if you can't shoot 1 arrow, you're not going to be able to shoot 3.
Right.
So, yeah.
But that's just a skill tree.
Yeah.
It's just a skill tree.
It's a skill tree. But but you're basing on a prerequisite, which is nice. I mean, yeah, like you're right. I'm not disagreeing with that. It's 100% a skill tree.
No,
just
the prereq is just a previous feat.
Exactly. So and I'm fine with that. I think that's a good way to go with it.
I think if you're going to go that route, at least have a skill tree because it's visually easy to see what skills you need.
Yeah.
What's funny is the way the Cosmere does it. You have the paths you can take. And then they have a separate page kind of going more into depth about what each power does. The problem is the page that goes into depth about each power has them alphabetically, not in the order in which you would achieve the feats. Which, yeah, that could have been done a little better.
So you like flowcharts, don't you?
No, I'm just saying I understand being like, oh, I want this first feat. What's the first one? It has nothing. Oh, that's not something I can get until 4 levels later.
Yeah, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah. I understand why they did it in alphabetical. It's easier to look up each individual one. Yeah. But at the same time, it's like, you would think.
Yeah, I guess actually the way I'd want to do it is at that point, it's categorical at that point, you know?
Yeah. So let's talk about it. We're making one. I came up with some ideas for feats.
Before we do that, we have a different one. We have anti-feats.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Charles.
Yeah, absolutely.
Anti-feats, which I think you found because Outer Worlds 2 is doing something similar to that?
Yes. So I was watching a clip of them reviewing Outer Worlds 2. They had this sneak features, like, you can have this sneak feat, basically, but you have to be crouching the whole time. It gives you a really high sneak ability, but once you stand up, your knees pop. I'm like, that is genius.
So the idea of complications, anti-feats, whatever you want to call them, Charles called them anti-feats. I don't agree.
Hands. Anti-feats. Another joke.
Okay, so basically... So the idea is you get a really cool thing, but a drawback. Mm-hmm. Now, Swede has some of these, but it's only the drawback. And the idea is the benefit you get is like maybe more bennies or something like that.
Oh, okay.
It's more resources.
Gotcha. So it's a way to gain something additional by almost kind of like how Peter has in his game, where if you play into your narrative, you get luck.
Right, but the difference is you're taking a feat, which again, these are optional, so it doesn't matter. Right. But I really like the ones where it's like, no, we're going to give you something that's really cool and borderline overpowered. Mm. It's an additional thing, but you come with a drawback, right? Mm. So what's interesting is, we were not anticipating all these games to come out with anti-feats.
Right. Which was crazy. Genuinely crazy. We're like, oh, wow, people are doing this already.
Draw Steel has their complications, and I think they got some really cool ones in there where you get to like flavor your character. You can be a chosen one that gets like access to some cool chosen one stuff, but a cult is following you. So you're Harry Potter.
Okay.
And at any point the GM could be like, and the cult's here to take you back. Right. So. That's a really cool narrative thing.
Yeah.
It gives the player the autonomy to choose what's happening, but then it gives the GM the story control to implement when it happens.
Yeah, especially if you find yourself as a GM like kind of at a wall.
Yes.
You're like, oh, what can I do? Oh, cultist. This person took this feat. So now the cultists show up. Oh, okay. Yeah, because you don't even need a reason for them to show up because you know why they're there.
Yeah. Simultaneously, Daggerheart just released in its playtest transformations, which are the same thing. You get this really, really cool ability, but there's a cost to it. So my favorite is the werewolf one, where you get to turn into your wolf form, and you get to do a lot of damage, like a D10 worth of damage. It's insane. You are constantly marking stress in order to keep it up, but it's really cool. The second you can't mark stress anymore, you go into a frenzy, hurt everybody within close range. It says every creature. I'm assuming that means yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I would follow that track. I want this. I 100% want that.
It's a very cool thing. They have vampires, they have like undead, they have like a bunch of different ones.
I have a thing for werewolves. I don't know what it is.
It's okay. I mean, lycanthropes are really cool.
Yeah.
I get it. But yeah, that's the idea, is that you get this downside. And so again, people are already thinking like, well, in the werewolf form, I know what I can do. I can do like a cool last stand moment, like everybody run. I'll take care of them. And then your team comes back to a bunch of mangled corpses and you just like panting but like bloodied and you're like, I got it.
Like they don't know your secret. That's really cool. I love that.
Yeah, you can do stuff like that. It could be really fun. They don't imply it, but I'm sure there's a way that a GM could spend fear in Daggerheart to force you to transform.
Ooh, that's good.
Well,
I like that.
And like the vampire one, you always have to feed. And the second you don't have enough feed tokens, basically, you go into a frenzy. It's stuff like that. So really cool and flavorful stuff can come out of it. And again, that is something that we're thinking about. I'm thinking about using it in our flaw system, where it's like you have a flaw, and every time you take a flaw, you can choose to take a feat associated with that flaw. And if you do, you get a really cool benefit, but a really bad downside as well.
Yeah, that's the way 100% I'd want to. If we're going to implement that, that's the way I'd want to go with it.
So anyway, now we're going to talk about
now.
Yes. So, Charles, you've been going. It seems like you've been wavering back and forth. I'm not going to force you to make a decision. That's what the live streams are for. But what are you leaning towards at this moment?
We talk about player autonomy, and feat trees kind of limit that autonomy, that the player's ability to kind of choose, especially if they're not big planners. So I think I'm leaning towards the prerequisites. I think that's probably the way we're going to go. I think I'd like to do it based on build, like the way Fallout does it.
Yeah, I think that I'm in agreement with that because I've already made some feats, and some of the ones that use the more supernatural abilities are locked into your heritage.
100%.
And you've talked about how you want humans, which is a very interesting, unique way. We'll see if anyone hates it. You want humans to be weaker. That's an easy way. You have, like, if I'm a ghost, I get access to all these possible feats. But if I'm a human, maybe I get one feat that I can pick, and that's it. It's the human feat.
Well, that's the thing, too. From where I stand, too, because, again, I love horror. I love supernatural. Specifically supernatural horror. That's probably one of my favorite genres of anything. I'm really into that kind of stuff because I always have been. I love the ideas of angels and demons and things like that, and werewolves and vampires. Every time I watch a movie or read a book about any of those things, the humans are always significantly weaker.
Right.
Which I'm like, that makes sense. They have this supernatural buff that the human doesn't have. So, and one thing we didn't want to do in our game was, because everyone does it, was, we'll make them, versatile because human beings can adapt. Well, that's fine for most games, but I feel like in mine, humans are they're just basic. Like they're going to be, because that's what we are.
I feel like what would be funny is you get one feat and it's called
Run for your life?
No. It's called blank canvas. And it's basically the idea of you have not been infected by the supernatural yet. And at some point in the campaign, you can choose to change your heritage and thus become supernatural.
You know what? We will talk about that on the live stream.
Yeah. I think that's just an interesting way of being like, well, humans get the one feat and it's at some point you could, and you obviously that could be a player and GM conversation, but 100%. I like the idea of putting it more in the player control, being like, all right, I'm choosing to go half ghost or half werewolf.
That'd be great for like the earlier gameplay where someone's just learning to play. Like, I just want to be a basic human, just kind of get my feel for it. Like, so this is going to happen. So, maybe, they kind of get to experience it a little bit before they actually make a decision.
It's our version of level 0.
Yeah, legitimately, that's what it is. I love it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That could be an interesting idea.
And then narratively, you can explain why, especially, so I'm a human. Oh, I became a ghost. I died. I became a werewolf. I became, or whatever we're called, ferals, So.
Yeah, and so it'll be interesting to see how much additional things, because we're still, like, even though people have seen, if you've seen our live streams, it might seem like we have a lot. There's a lot in my head that I'm like, no, we're still fleshing it out. And so, like, from adding prerequisites from build stents, I don't think everything should have a prereq.
I agree.
But I think if we're going to go Fallout, we should look at, like, okay, what then do we want the prereqs to be, right? And so, again, we'll talk about that on our live stream on the 29th. Check it out. It's going to be on the 29th of this month, being August 2025.
So I 100% want to do that too. I also need to do some research myself to find out what I want. I was told by a couple people to check out Suede, their feats, so that is on my list. I'm going to compare it to what I have in Fallout, what I've seen in Fallout.
Morkborg, I think Peter said.
Yeah, which I have that. I read through some of that. That is a terrifying looking book. And even on the inside, like I saw that at one Innies, and that's cool. It's like, but I'm like, it's well written. I'm like, this is very dark.
It is. You know what isn't dark though? Our Discord and Patreon, and also many ways you can support us over here at What is Tabletop.
YouTube memberships.
Yes. Thank you for all of those of you who have joined.
Yes, we appreciate you.
And enjoyed the bonus video that's coming out this week. And by this week, I mean today, I think. It's up. It's up.
It's up.
Anyway, any last beats of information, Charles? You can tell that this is post-Gen Con because our video conversations are a lot longer. Pre-Gen Con, it was like, we got to record.
Yeah, now we're like, no, we can kind of take it a little easy and talk. I don't think I have anything else other than... Still smells like feet in here.
Stay witty, unlike Charles.
I'm the wittiest. What are you talking about?
No, you're the punniest.
Pun is wit.
No.
Pun is wit.
It's the lowest form of wit.
Tell us in the comments. Lowest form of wit. That's our shirt.